From Lawrence Taylor, whose addiction started as soon as his professional career started, to Hall of Famer Joe Namath, whose personal issues led him down a dark path. These are NFL legends who had crippling addictions. Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor, affectionately and menacingly known throughout the football world as simply LT, is widely regarded as one of the most devastating defensive players to ever strap on a helmet, a two-time Super Bowl champion and Hall of Famer, whose speed and ferocity redefined what a linebacker could be in the modern game. But beneath the fearsome exterior that terrorized quarterbacks across the NFL for over a decade, Taylor was quietly waging a war against himself, a war that he would publicly lose over and over again for decades to come. Taylor's descent into hard drugs began almost as soon as his professional career did. During his rookie season in 1981, cocaine entered his life, and what started as recreational indulgence escalated into something far more monstrous. By his third season in the league, Taylor was reportedly consuming up to an ounce of crack cocaine in a single day, a staggering amount that would have incapacitated most ordinary human beings. He managed to evade the NFL's drug testing protocols in those early years through a method as crude as it was effective, admitting openly that he submitted teammates' urine samples in place of his own to beat the tests that would have ended his career much sooner. The house of cards finally began to collapse in 1987 when Taylor tested positive for cocaine and received an official warning from the league. In 1988, a second failed test triggered a 30-day suspension that cost him 4 games. Taylor managed to stay clean during his final playing years purely out of self-preservation, knowing that a third violation would effectively end his playing career. But the moment he retired in 1993, the chains came off completely, and Taylor dove headlong back into the abyss, later describing crack cocaine as the only bright spot in his future. What followed was a grim parade of arrests and interventions. In 1996, he was busted in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, trying to purchase $100 of crack from undercover officers. In 1998, he was arrested again in St. Petersburg, Florida, attempting to buy $50 worth of crack with 15 pipes discovered in the room around him. A 2001 conviction in New Jersey for drug paraphernalia added another black mark to his rap sheet. Taylor entered rehab multiple times, including twice in 1995 and again in 1998, and later even admitted to dabbling with heroin alongside cocaine during particularly vulnerable moments in his life. Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin, the electric, showboating wide receiver who helped lead the Dallas Cowboys to 3 Super Bowl championships in the 1990s, was a Hall of Fame talent whose personality was as big as his on-field production. Nicknamed the Playmaker, Irvin was the heart and soul of one of the most dominant offenses in NFL history. But off the field, he was quietly spiraling into a cocaine addiction that would eventually explode into one of the most scandalous arrests in league history. In March of 1996, at the absolute peak of his professional powers, Irvin was caught in a Dallas-area motel room along with a former teammate and several other individuals. When police entered the scene, they discovered cocaine, marijuana, and an assortment of drug paraphernalia scattered throughout the room. Irvin was staring down the barrel of felony charges that carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years behind bars, a punishment that would have essentially ended not just his career, but his life as he knew it. Rather than rolling the dice with a jury trial, Irvin pleaded no contest to second-degree felony cocaine possession, a legal maneuver that ultimately spared him from prison time. The final sentence was still substantial, however, including 4 years of deferred adjudication probation, a $10,000 fine, and 1,000 hours of community service. The NFL, never one to let these matters slide quietly, responded by suspending Irvin for the first 5 games of the 1996 season without pay, a financial and professional blow that served as an additional layer of consequence on top of the legal penalties. Unfortunately, the 1996 motel room bust was not the final chapter in Irvin's troubles with controlled substances. In 2001, he was arrested once again, this time on felony cocaine possession charges, though some reports indicate those charges were eventually dropped. Then, in 2005, another incident involving drug paraphernalia landed him back in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, reinforcing the public perception that his battle with addiction was far from over, even after his playing days had ended. In the years since those dark chapters, Irvin has spoken with remarkable openness and vulnerability about what happened, appearing in interviews, documentaries, and podcasts to unpack the denial he lived in during his playing days. He has credited his turnaround to a combination of deep religious faith and ongoing personal growth, repeatedly emphasizing that those rock-bottom moments were what ultimately forced him to confront the man he had become. and begin the long process of building someone new in his place. Cris Carter. Cris Carter, the acrobatic wide receiver whose impossible catches made him a household name and earned him a rightful place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, began his professional career with the Philadelphia Eagles in 1987, but those early years in the league were anything but the storybook beginning his talent deserved. Carter's rookie and sophomore seasons were marred by a heavy and varied pattern of substance abuse that included alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy. Carter failed 3 drug tests over the span of 3 years with the Eagles, and those failures created an increasingly tense and ultimately irreparable relationship with the team's famously no-nonsense head coach Buddy Ryan. Despite Carter's obvious talent and productive on-field contributions, Ryan made the stunning decision to cut him loose in 1990, a move that shocked many in the football world given Carter's clear potential. That release, as devastating as it felt in the moment, turned out to be precisely the wake-up call Carter desperately needed. He was claimed on waivers by the Minnesota Vikings, an organization that would go on to invest heavily in his recovery and rehabilitation, including the personal involvement of part owner Wheelock Whitney and a counselor named Betty Trilogy. The Vikings provided comprehensive treatment, robust emotional support, and a structured path back to wellness that Carter embraced with the same intensity he brought to his route running. From that pivotal moment onward, Carter achieved a sobriety that he has meticulously tracked in the years since, citing figures like 31 years and more than 12,000 days clean in later interviews. In 1996, he went even further and became an ordained minister. Carter has consistently credited his remarkable turnaround to a combination of religious faith, the Vikings recovery program, and his own personal determination to rewrite the trajectory of his life. That transformation paid extraordinary dividends on the field as well, as Carter went on to earn 8 consecutive Pro Bowl selections, rack up elite career statistics, and eventually enshrine himself in Canton as one of the greatest receivers of his generation. Brett Favre. Brett Favre, the gunslinging, grizzly-bearded quarterback from Mississippi who became the face of the Green Bay Packers for the better part of 2 decades, is a Hall of Famer, an NFL Most Valuable Player, and one of the most beloved figures in the history of the sport. But behind the fairy tale public image was a man trapped in a devastating dependency on prescription painkillers, primarily Vicodin, that nearly destroyed him during the very years he was cementing his legacy as an all-time great. Favre's addiction took root and began to escalate in the mid-1990s, a direct consequence of the cumulative injuries and surgeries that come with playing quarterback in the National Football League. What started as legitimate pain management morphed into something far darker and more compulsive. Favre has admitted in harrowing detail that he would take as many as 14 to 16 Vicodin pills in a single sitting, blasting through a month's supply of the powerful opioid in just a couple of days, and suffering from severe sleep deprivation while he continued to play through the physical torment of professional football. The consequences of this escalating abuse were not merely emotional or relational. Favre suffered actual seizures linked to the abuse, including one in the hospital following ankle surgery that finally served as the major wake-up call he had been ignoring for years. Favre entered the NFL's substance abuse program and attended rehab multiple times, reportedly 3 stints in total. These included a lengthy stay in Kansas City in 1996 for painkillers during the very season the Packers went on to win the Super Bowl, a 28-day stint in Rayville, Louisiana earlier for pills, and another 28-day rehab in 1998 focused on alcohol after an ultimatum from his wife. Beyond the pills, Favre also battled serious problems with binge drinking, a second front in his war against himself that often flared up right alongside his opioid dependency. He has spoken openly about reaching suicidal lows, about shaking violently through cold turkey withdrawals, and about the devastating ripple effects his addictions had on his wife, his children, and his extended family. Favre has since achieved sobriety and reflected on his journey in numerous interviews and podcasts, noting with some pride that he has not taken a single Vicodin since that terrifying seizure in the hospital, while also openly acknowledging that the brain retains cravings long after the substance is gone. Earl Campbell. Earl Campbell, the bruising, punishing Houston Oilers running back whose punishing running style earned him the poetic nickname, the Tyler Rose, after his Texas hometown, is one of the most physically imposing Hall of Famers the league has ever known. But the very running style that made him a legend also exacted a terrible toll on his body, setting in motion a cascade of medical complications and surgical interventions that would eventually lead him into the darkest chapter of his life. a crippling addiction to prescription opioid painkillers. Campbell's body bore the cumulative damage of years of football violence, including multiple spinal surgeries, knee replacements, and chronic back pain made worse by scoliosis. Following his retirement from professional football, doctors prescribed him powerful opioid medications such as OxyContin and hydrocodone to help him manage the constant, grinding pain that had become his everyday reality. What began as a legitimate medical intervention quickly metastasized into something considerably more sinister. What started as a couple of pills gradually escalated to Campbell, taking up to 10 per day, often washing them down with beer, a dangerous combination that could have easily killed him. This spiraling dependency began to affect his daily functioning in increasingly visible ways, even as he continued to operate a successful sausage business and maintain his public profile as a Texas football icon. Around the 2009 to 2012 timeframe, a family intervention led primarily by Campbell's own sons finally convinced him that something had to change. He entered a rehabilitation facility in Austin, initially resisting the idea with the same stubbornness that had carried him through countless defensive lines during his playing days. But once he was there, something shifted inside him. He ended up staying far longer than the originally planned 28 days, extending his stay up to 44 days. And during group therapy sessions, he experienced a humbling realization that his prescription pill addiction paralleled the experiences of heroin users sitting alongside him in the circle. Campbell has since achieved sobriety, reporting multiple years clean in interviews dating from 2012 through 2016 and beyond. He walks with improved mobility after additional surgical work, actively mentors others facing similar battles, and has become a vocal evangelist about the dangers of painkillers and the redemptive power of recovery and faith. Joe Namath. Joe Namath, the legendary New York Jets quarterback known to the world simply as Broadway Joe, is a Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl III most valuable player, and one of the most charismatic figures in the long history of American professional sports. But beneath the fur coats, the swagger, the guaranteed Super Bowl prediction, and the Hollywood lifestyle, Namath was quietly being consumed by a decades-long battle with alcohol that intensified dramatically after his playing career ended. Heavy drinking marked much of Namath's post-NFL life, including the years he spent dabbling in Hollywood projects, chasing endorsement deals, and navigating personal challenges such as his divorce, which he has since openly admitted he used as a convenient excuse to drink even more heavily than he already was. The quarterback whose knees had been wrecked by the brutal realities of professional football found that alcohol offered a kind of numbness that legitimate pain relief never quite achieved, and he leaned into that numbness harder and harder as the years rolled on. Namath detailed his battle extensively in his 2019 autobiography titled All the Way: My Life in 4 Quarters, a deeply personal accounting of just how close he had come to destroying himself. In the book, and in the promotional interviews surrounding its release, Namath described in stark terms how alcohol had kicked my butt for a long time and nearly obliterated him. A truly pivotal low point in Namath's struggle came during an infamous 2003 sideline interview with ESPN's Susie Colbert, during which a visibly intoxicated Namath made an awkward and widely replayed comment about wanting to kiss her. The moment went viral before viral was even a common term, becoming one of the most cringeworthy sports broadcasting moments in recent memory. But Namath, in the aftermath and in his later reflections, viewed that public humiliation as a blessing in disguise that ultimately fueled his resolve to change through a combination of deep shame and the unwavering love of his family. He quit drinking cold after that incident, has remained sober ever since, and has stated plainly in later reflections that if he had not managed to stop when he did, he would probably be dead by now. Ricky Williams, the dreadlocked, enigmatic running back who captured the 1998 Heisman Trophy at the University of Texas and went on to earn NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year honors in 1999, carved out one of the most unusual and controversy-soaked careers the league has ever seen. For years, Williams was the poster child for the NFL's increasingly fraught relationship with marijuana, a player whose remarkable talent was continually overshadowed by his willingness to consume cannabis regardless of what the league's rulebook said about it. Williams tested positive for marijuana shortly after joining the Miami Dolphins and was subsequently suspended multiple times, with at least 5 reported violations, costing him significant amounts of playing time, including the entirety of both the 2004 and 2006 seasons. In 2004, he initially cited vague personal issues as the reason for his sudden retirement, but later admitted that marijuana had played a much larger role in his decision, as he had just failed yet another drug test and knew the consequences would be severe. Williams has been remarkably candid in discussing his reasons for using cannabis throughout his career, citing its role in helping him manage social anxiety, borderline personality disorder, and the physical pain from football. He even credited marijuana with helping his on-field performance, noting that he rattled off back-to-back 300-yard games in college shortly after first trying it. Perhaps most revealing of all, Williams has described a kind of underground pharmaceutical culture inside NFL locker rooms, recounting how veterans would actually teach rookies to mix marijuana with Vicodin for more effective pain management, a combination that was clearly not sanctioned by any team physician, but was nonetheless widespread. Williams has reported being drug tested at least 500 times during his NFL career, an astonishing figure that speaks to just how thoroughly the league scrutinized him. After his playing days concluded, Williams transformed himself into an outspoken advocate for cannabis legalization and therapeutic use, launching his own cannabis brand and noting with some satisfaction the NFL's eventual policy evolution, including ending suspensions for marijuana in 2020. Todd Marinovich. Todd Marinovich, the son of a football-obsessed father who raised him from infancy to be a professional quarterback, was once hailed as robo-quarterback or robo-QB, a living experiment in what rigorously controlled athletic development could produce. But the very pressures that shaped him also broke him, and his NFL career was derailed almost immediately by a devastating pattern of substance abuse that began in college and exploded into full-blown catastrophe once the money started flowing. Drafted in the first round by the Los Angeles Raiders in 1991, Marinovich significantly increased his partying and drug use during his rookie season, including not only marijuana, but also pharmaceutical amphetamines that he reportedly took before games. In his second season, he cleverly and ruinously pivoted to LSD after games because the substance did not show up on the NFL's standard drug tests, a grim innovation that allowed him to keep using while technically remaining within the league's detection parameters for a time. Eventually, his evasions caught up with him. He failed multiple NFL drug tests in succession. The first resulted in mandated treatment. The second occurred while he was an active starter and involved substances that had previously gone undetected. And the third came during training camp before the 1993 season for marijuana, triggering a full season suspension. The Raiders, clearly fed up with the chaos, released him after just 2 seasons and a grand total of 8 games played. But the NFL release was merely the opening chapter of Marinovich's descent. Post-NFL, his struggles intensified dramatically as he sampled an extensive menu of substances, including ecstasy, cocaine, heroin, crack, and methamphetamine. That downward trajectory led to more than a dozen arrests, multiple incarcerations, and more than 7 separate rehab stays. Marinovich has explained his drug use with striking introspection, describing how substances quieted an inner loathing and helped him escape the enormous pressure of his engineered childhood. He eventually found a measure of purpose through art and the recovery process, documenting his harrowing journey in a 2025 memoir, even as he continues to battle his addictions publicly and honestly. Ryan Leaf. Ryan Leaf, the strapping quarterback out of Washington State University, who was famously selected 2nd overall in the 1998 NFL draft by the San Diego Chargers, directly behind some guy named Peyton Manning, is one of the most cautionary tales in the entire history of American professional football. His on-field career was a dumpster fire of epic proportions, but what came after was somehow even darker. While he was still in the NFL, Leaf was prescribed Vicodin for injuries stemming from his numerous surgeries, a fairly standard part of football life at the time. But his addiction truly took on a life of its own after retirement, when Leaf started using the pills not to numb physical pain, but to numb the crushing emotional agony and mental health struggles that came with being publicly labeled one of the biggest draft busts in history. The turning point into full addiction came at a post-fight party where a friend offered him Vicodin mixed with alcohol, a combination that provided him with what he would later describe as an escape into a foggy ether of nothingness. That foggy ether quickly became his preferred address. The dependency ballooned into a daily ritual, and when he could no longer afford to purchase pills through legitimate or even semi-legitimate channels, Leaf resorted to breaking into homes and stealing directly from medicine cabinets, behavior that led to multiple arrests, burglary charges, and eventually a serious suicide attempt. Leaf ultimately served 32 months in prison, and it was there, around month 26, that he experienced a profound epiphany after being paired with a cellmate whose personal story genuinely reached him. That encounter planted the seeds of what has become an impressively durable recovery. Leaf has since achieved long-term sobriety, with more than 14 years clean, according to recent accounts, received comprehensive mental health treatment, and has completely reinvented himself as a recovery advocate, public speaker, and football commentator who now travels the country sharing his story to help others navigate addiction and mental health challenges, emphasizing personal responsibility and a philosophy of service to others above self. Eric Ainge. Eric Ainge, a backup quarterback for the New York Jets who starred at the University of Tennessee before his professional selection, lived a story that played out mostly in the shadows of bigger names, but was every bit as harrowing as any of the more famous cases on this list. Ainge's battle with addiction started shockingly early in his life, beginning with marijuana at the tender age of 12 and escalating steadily through his teen years and into adulthood. By the time Ainge was finishing his senior year at Tennessee, the substance menu had expanded to include alcohol, prescription painkillers such as Percocet and Vicodin taken in enormous quantities, cocaine, and heroin. His dependence on painkillers became particularly acute during his senior season following injuries, a period during which he was reportedly consuming handfuls of pills at a time just to get through daily activities. After being drafted by the New York Jets in 2008, Ainge managed to hold things together long enough to earn a roster spot, but the wheels came off entirely before the start of the 2010 season. He missed that entire year after going on a 2-week drug and alcohol bender immediately before training camp, a relapse that finally sent him into serious rehab. He had actually attended rehab previously in 2009, but had relapsed shortly afterward, a pattern that many addicts will recognize as painfully familiar. Ainge has been publicly open about surviving multiple overdoses, maintaining what he described as an expensive habit that involved withdrawing hundreds of dollars from ATMs for drugs, the destruction of many personal relationships, and the presence of a co-occurring bipolar disorder diagnosis that complicated every single aspect of his recovery journey. He entered intensive treatment and achieved sobriety starting July 17, 2010, a date he has cited as the longest stretch he had gone clean since childhood at the time of his 2011 public disclosure. Ainge has credited his survival and ongoing recovery to a combination of rehab, therapy, 12-step programs, and eventually, faith. While his on-field NFL career remained limited to just a handful of game appearances, Ainge has become a powerful advocate in the recovery community, sharing his raw, unvarnished story to help others facing addiction and mental health challenges. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to watch another fascinating video like this, click on one of the boxes on your screen right now.